incredible opportunity ahead of us that we can do a much better job, I think, as a church, including people and their loved ones that live with disability.
Welcome everyone to Refined and Refreshed. It is me, Ralph Monroe, and I have an awesome guest from an awesome ministry. And I'm really looking forward to this because it's something that I never thought about, or it's not on the forefront of my mind, but this ministry is really and truly important. And that is Ability Ministry. And we're here with Ryan Wolfe. He's the president and executive director of Ability Ministry. And what is Ability Ministry? I'll let Ryan give you the more details on it, but it is a Christian nonprofit ministry that strives to enhance the lives of persons affected with disabilities, and they provide services for persons with developmental disabilities. They seek to equip and empower churches, individuals, as well as organizations on how to help serve and minister to people who are affected by disability. And so I'm really, truly just ready to listen, to learn, and hopefully those who are listening, that this will be something that you too could take in and take with you, but also look into Ability Ministry and see how your church or your organization can benefit from it, and also how you can, probably implement it into your organization. So without further ado, Ryan, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate you doing a little spotlight on our ministry and helping us get the word out about such an important ministry as we look at people affected by disability being the largest unreached people group in the world. That over 1 billion people in the world live with disabilities, and that we believe it's the only mission field that exists in every community across the globe. You don't have to travel over an ocean to reach out to people affected by disabilities and their families and their loved ones. So it's a prime opportunity, I think, for churches, individuals, organizations to really plug in and meet a need in their own community.
Yeah, and the reason why I even reached out is because I'm in school for my master's of theology.
Awesome.
And right now I'm taking a class called Christian Ethics, and it deals with facing questions that we would not normally think about. And one of the questions that arose that one day was, about persons who are affected by disability. And so I was like, wow, I need to learn more about this. This is it's so a part of our everyday.
Absolutely. And man, I'm so glad that you're, going through that process, getting your master's. That's an awesome thing. I think what we have seen, though, is whether it be undergraduate or graduate degrees in ministry, next to no universities even offer an option in disability ministry. It's not a degree that you can get. At best, you can probably hope to have maybe one class in it that will touch on the subject. Occasionally, I'll get invited to, guest teach at a university, but it's like a one class in amongst an entire semester. So people don't hear about it a lot. So it's kind of one of those ministries. It's out of sight, out of mind. Yeah. And thankfully, because of how people with disabilities have been more integrated and included in our society, at least now they are not out of sight, out of mind. When I was growing up in school in the 80s, as a kid, where kids weren't included and they were completely segregated in a different part of the building, in a different classroom. I grew up and graduated with people that I didn't even know were at my same school. So it's just kind of like the out of sight, out of mind thing. Again, I think our society's doing a better job of including people with disabilities. I think our churches, however, aren't doing the best job and need to kind of catch up with society. So yeah, we have an incredible opportunity ahead of us that we can do a much better job, I think, as a church, including people and their loved ones that live with disability.
Awesomeness, man. So with that, man, can you give us a more, I guess, in-depth view of ability ministry and your purpose and like just different things that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. As an organization, there's not a whole lot of nonprofit ministry organizations that their main purpose is to reach the disability community for Christ. So we're pretty proud of the fact that we've been around for about 40 years. So as an organization, again, there's not many of us out there, and there's very few of us that have kind of a long-standing history in reaching the disability community for Christ. So we started our official charters back in the mid 1980s. I think 1986 is when our organization was officially chartered. And we started off as a residential ministry, and we still do have a residential ministry for adults with intellectual developmental disabilities. Our residential facilities are in Tennessee and in Missouri. So that's kind of where we're doing residential ministry right now. But that's kind of one wing of our organization. The other kind of wing of our organization is the equipping and evangelism, teaching, training side of the organization, where we work with churches, universities, and any organization really that's interested in reaching their disability community for Christ. So one of the things that we major in is content development for churches to be able to use in their special needs ministries or disability ministries. We're probably most well known for the curriculum that we write for churches to use in their adult classes. And we also have some children's curriculum and curriculum for teens. So that's probably what we're most well known for right now, is that curriculum development. Anybody that wants to know more about Ability Ministry, we're super easy to find. Abilityministry.com, our website, and at Ability Ministry for most of our social media pages. So yeah, we'd encourage people to engage with us because we're so passionate about equipping and empowering churches to reach their disability community for Christ. We do consultation for free. Like,
Awesome.
That's one of those things that, we're just like, we don't want there to be a barrier for a church to be equipped and empowered. So we help churches. Again, consultations free if we're doing it over the phone or doing it via like video conferencing. We don't charge anything for it. Only time we charge is if a church would bring us in person, So 90% of the stuff that we do and create, we give away for free because we're just passionate about equipping individuals and churches to reach their community for Christ.
That's awesome to hear. That's really awesome to hear. You spoke about barriers, and what are some common issues that you see when it comes to churches and how they minister to people affected by disability?
Yeah, I think most common barriers are the things that people typically think about, those physical barriers to accessibility. Everybody thinks about, does a church have steps or a ramp? That's a physical accessibility thing, and those are the things that honestly are the easiest things to fix. You can just make the decision to build the ramp, build the elevator, do different things that bridge the gap of physical accessibility issues. Those are easy to fix. Every church should have a list of that, and we actually do have an accessibility checklist that churches can go through their campus and check off things that they need to address. Because in 1990, when Congress signed into law, President Bush signed into law the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. There was one exemption that was given. The exemption was given to religious institutions and houses of worship. They were the only group that our government said you don't have to follow ADA standards. So there are a lot of churches that have physical accessibility issues because they're not required by law to be accessible, which is mind-boggling. So we help churches do that. But what I would like to highlight here is the fact that those aren't the things that most churches really need to work on. Though it's good to do those things, and yes, you need to do that. The thing that's harder to work on, and the hard work is always the stuff that people avoid to do, is address the attitudinal and sometimes the bad theology that stands in the way to inclusion. Okay. Because if we have a bad attitude or if we have bad theology when it comes to disability, it really stops any progress towards inclusion and belonging. And I think a lot of that comes back to the fact that there has always been this negative narrative that has existed from the beginning of time about disability, and people buy into this negative narrative because they've never stopped to challenge their own thinking. So that's one of the things, again, we help churches to kind of overcome some of those attitudinal barriers, some of those bad theology things that and again, it's not that people are necessarily anti people with disabilities. They've just grown up in a world that has a negative narrative about disability, and they've just bought it hook, line, and sinker without really challenging that.
That's good. Could you would you do you have an example of like a bad theological view of persons affected by disability? Not saying that person is meant on purpose. It could be embedded. Is there an example that you can give?
Yeah, absolutely. So like John chapter 9, verses 1-3. This is the example of, Jesus is walking along with his disciples, and the scriptures say in verse 1, it says, Jesus saw the man who was born blind. It doesn't say the disciples saw him. So again, that idea of sometimes people affected by disability, people that live with disability, they are invisible because people choose not to see them. Okay. And then the disciples stop and they're kind of like, Jesus, hey, what's going on with this guy? Right. In fact, the specific question the disciples ask is, why was this man born blind? Was he born blind because he sinned, A, or B, his parents sinned? So that tells us that their theological viewpoint of disability is it's a punishment from God, right? Somebody sinned, so this man had to be punished for that, and he is being punished by the fact that he is blind. So his disability is his punishment from God. That was their theological viewpoint. These are the disciples, the people that are closest to Jesus. And Jesus stops them right there, like immediately. And in verse 3, John 9, verse 3, Jesus says to them, neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born essentially on purpose, for a purpose, a divine purpose. He was born this way so that, these are the words of Jesus, so that the power of God might be displayed in his life. And that's so powerful. See, Jesus in one sentence, in one verse, completely changes the disciples' worldview and their theology about disability. He says, no, disability is not a punishment from God. It possesses a divine purpose where my power will be shown. So disability, not a punishment, but an opportunity for God's power to be shown. And when you have that theology, you have that proper viewpoint of disability, it's a total game changer. Because you don't avoid somebody. If you think somebody's a sinner and you think negatively about them, you're going to want to avoid them, just like the disciples did. Yeah. But if you view somebody with a disability as someone who is an image bearer of God that has a specific opportunity to show God's power, you're going to want to be a part of that. And I just love what John chapter 9 verses, specifically 1-3, but the entire chapter really talk and change theology and worldviews.
Awesomeness, man. I really I love it. How did you get to the point of having this passion? I think it says, I think your bio said Micah 6:8 is something that helps drive and describes your commitment to life and ministry. How did you get to the point of like your passion to equip and empower, churches, individual organizations to reach their disability communities?
Yeah, so Micah 6:8 is kind of like a family calling that we have, to walk humbly, to love, and to seek justice. We really feel like, in a lot of ways, us standing up for and being an advocate for and a voice for those with disabilities is our calling. Another verse, Proverbs 31:8, is kind of like my ministry calling, where the scriptures say, "Speak up for those who don't have a voice, and stand up for those who are being crushed or oppressed." And literally, you think about the people who literally at times don't have a voice as people in the disability community. I think as much as possible, people should be given, a voice and be allowed to advocate for themselves. But there are also, instances where people need to stand in for those that are being oppressed and speak up for them and with them and alongside of them. So that's kind of like my passion and calling. One of the things that makes, I think, me unique is that I don't have immediate, or I didn't have like an immediate family member with a disability. That's the reason why I got into disability ministry. I'd say 90% of the people that are in disability ministry because they have a child or they grew up with a sibling, with a disability, and their eyes were open to it. That wasn't my case. You hear a lot of, when you're getting into ministry and stuff, guys that are in youth or girls that are in youth ministry, or, people that are in preaching ministry, they say, God, I'm called to be, a preaching pastor. I'm called to be a youth pastor. And, they wear it as a badge. And nobody ever says I'm called to be, a disability pastor. But that was like my feeling. I was like, just like I'm seeing all my friends say, I'm called to do this, called to do that. And I thought, God's called me, Proverbs 31:8, to be a voice for the voiceless and to speak up for those who are being oppressed, specifically the disability community. And we really view disability as part of the diversity conversation. And we feel like you can't have true diversity unless you're addressing disability, because it's the largest unreached people group. It's the largest minority group that exists everywhere. People with disabilities are abused and neglected at a higher rate than any other people group in the entire world. And for those reasons, like, we really are passionate, about being a voice, helping to seek justice and find places of inclusion, because God calls us. Again, I'll share one more verse, then I'll be quiet. But Jesus himself in Luke 14:21 is talking to the church leadership of his day, and he says, "Go out quickly and bring in all who are poor and disabled." And this is the parable of the great banquet. So it's a direct command from Jesus. And I'm like, you know what? If I'm going to spend my life doing anything, it's going to be being obedient to a command of Jesus, where he's telling church leaders, go out, bring in all who are poor and disabled, because he wants them to be a part. They are a part of God's family, and he wants them to be included in this lifetime, not only in the kingdom, but to come. So yeah, just a couple of reasons, why I'm passionate and why I feel like, God's called me to this specific ministry.
Awesomeness. I mean, I can see it oozing out of you when you're talking about it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Real quick, from your experience and people you worked with, has there been is there any aversion from someone who's affected by a disability to go, be a part of a church or something like that? And if so, like, what are those aversions?
Yeah, I think if there are, hesitancies or aversions or, whatever, an obstacle for somebody, that lives with disability to want to be a part of the faith community, it's typically because of one of two things. One, they've had a negative personal experience themselves in the past with a religious organization, church. So we hear it all the time when we're doing consultations, or we're here, on social media interacting with individuals and families, that they come to us heartbroken, and they say, you know what, I've got a child on the autism spectrum, or, I myself have a disability, and I've tried to attend church, but people have told me I'm not welcome, or people have turned their child away because they've literally said, we don't know what to do with them, or there's another church that's a better fit for you. The feedback that they get. So number one, either they've had a negative experience, or number two, because the disability community is such a tight-knit community, that is a very loyal group of people, they hear of the negative experience about the church down the road, and that colors the way they see the church, and they're like, you know what, my friend had a bad experience. There's no way that I'm going to risk getting hurt by going to church. So, those are a couple things that I think maybe stop people from wanting to take a chance and having an experience at a church or a faith, community or religious organization, just because there have been negative things that have happened. And there's so many things that churches can do to overcome those, bad experiences, to build trust. And those are some of the things that we help churches with, strategies, to earn trust over time in their community.
Awesomeness. And is that a part of what you all call being an indispensable church?
Yeah, Indispensable Church, we got that name from 1 Corinthians 12:22. This is when the Apostle Paul is talking about the, different parts of the body of Christ. And we love this verse especially when it comes to disability ministry, because this verse specifically says, he says, and on the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker. Now notice he says seem to be weaker. It's again this perception, this worldview, this negative worldview about disability. Those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are actually indispensable to the church. Okay. And if you look up the word indispensable in the dictionary, the definition of indispensable is something you can't do without. All right. So, you take that definition from the dictionary, you line it up with what Paul's saying. He's saying, people that you think are weak. So, you could put a lot of different people into that, kind of bucket, but people with disabilities, children, all those people that, you would say are vulnerable. Paul's saying, you can't have a complete church without this people group. In fact, this is the people group that we need the most in church. So we talk about churches. Hey, if you want to have a complete church, if you want to function the way that God has designed church to function, you must include this people group. So we did create kind of a ministry model that's kind of way outside the box called Indispensable Church. So and we wrote a 40-page manual on how to do an indispensable church model. So definitely an outside the box church model that we had a lot of churches signed on to launch in Kentucky, in the state of Kentucky, under this church ministry model. It's really like a church planting model, essentially outside the box, from what you would typically do on a Sunday morning. And they had their launch dates set for March 2020. And what happened March 2020. So we're kind of retooling a little bit on that, trying to help them with this different church model. So anybody that's interested in looking at our indispensable church model can go to abilityministry.com, just search Indispensable Church, and you'll find it. Like I said, a 40-page manual on how to do it. And I put almost all of my consultation tricks and tips in this manual to help churches, take practical steps in helping to launch this type of ministry. So definitely something that people should check out.
Awesomeness. And lastly, is there words of exhortation that you could give to church leaders or leaders from organizational leaders, individuals who might be listening now? Any exhortation that you would personally like to give them?
Yeah, I think kind of the charge that I would like to leave with people is, we all strive to be obedient to Jesus, right? If not, we're probably in the wrong business. And it's just unique to me that, as pastors and leaders, sometimes we kind of piecemeal the gospel. And we say, okay, we're going to do this, and we ignore some of these other things. My plea to different church leaders would be, don't ignore the command from Jesus in Luke chapter 14, where Jesus, check this out, Luke chapter 14, this is Jesus meeting with church leadership on one of the final Sabbaths that he has before he goes to the cross and takes all the sins of humanity with him. So you would think, as he's got church leadership's ear, he would talk to them about, how to give a better sermon, how to run a better capital campaign, all these different things that we spend so much time stressing out about. But Jesus doesn't do any of those things. He spends the entire chapter 3 different times with church leadership, pleading for church leadership to reach out and include the poor and the disabled. And so, these are Jesus's kind of parting words to church leadership, his final, Sabbath or two before he goes to the cross. And he makes this plea 3 different times in this chapter alone to bring in the poor and the disabled into my family, into the great banquet, into the kingdom. So I just say, hey, as we all strive to be obedient to Jesus, let's not forget one of his final pleas to the church leadership of his day, which I believe is still a plea that he's making, and he's waiting for us to be obedient to. I think one of the things that is, kind of holding back the second coming of Christ is he's still waiting on church leadership to be obedient to us in bringing in the poor and the disabled. So just be obedient And if it's intimidating or scary, because a lot of people are afraid and have, misconceptions and irrational fears about interacting with people with disabilities and including them, that's what we're here for. Like I said, we do free consultation with churches. We have, like I said, 90% of our materials on abilityministry.com are free. So just check us out. We want to help you be obedient to Jesus. So that would be kind of my parting plea to churches.
Awesomeness. Thank you so much, Ryan. Would you mind just closing us out in prayer regarding this topic? And and we'll close from there.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, by the way.
Oh, no problem.
So God, thank you for this day that you've granted us. God, thank you for giving us one more day to chase after you, to be obedient, to bring glory to your name, and to build your kingdom until you come again. So Lord, I just pray that you help us as we seek to follow after you, to really pay attention to your words, to your example. And Lord, help us to not be motivated by fear, but be motivated by love and inclusion, bringing all people together. And that all people, like you plead, includes the poor and the disabled. So Lord, help us to be obedient to that. And Lord, help us to be obedient to you always. We love you, Jesus. It's in your name we pray. Amen.